Now moving into the realities of communities during the slave trade, enslavement eras in the Americas, and the community that best and has an end-to-end story to tell us that experience. The Gullah-Geechee folks of South Carolina, in what's known as the Low Country. We have the best moderator for this session, Amadu Massally. He has walked those grounds and associated, he's a Sierra Leonean, and he's made a lot of connections in that area. And he is the best person to lead us through that. Amadu Massally, it's all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian, and everyone else. Good morning. I must say thank you to all the efforts that have been put into bringing this event, or the week-long activities that have led up to this event. And hopefully we'll get to learn some more today. I particularly want to talk about a specific relationship where we have found some of the deepest connections between Africans and African Americans. I'm not saying there are not other stories, but this one has the best examples you can find in terms of how Africans connect to African Americans in some of these stories that you will hear about today. But from Sierra Leone and other parts of West Africa, Africans were taken to the colonies, South Carolina first, and then Georgia later. After that, some of these guys ran away from slavery into the Florida wilderness, fought against the US Army, kept them at bay for 7 years. Finally, they agreed to negotiate, and they went west into Oklahoma. From Oklahoma, after a few years, some of them went into Nacimiento, Mexico, where a historian has told me that he found Tammany wards in Mexico, Tammany wards. And then from Mexico, they ended up in Brackettville, Texas. So we have people from one or more of these areas that will tell their stories with regard to what they know about their connections to Africa. First, I want to call on Victoria Smalls. She's the executive director of the Gullah-Geechee Heritage Cultural Commission, Gullah-Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor Commission. Victoria Smalls, welcome.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Amadu. It's so great to see everyone. I'm glad to see you today. So on behalf of the Gullah-Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor, National Heritage Area in the United States of America, and our 11 federally appointed commissioners, I bring greetings to you from our satellite office in Beaufort, South Carolina. I myself, I'm a proud Gullah-Geechee woman from St. Helena Island, South Carolina, and I am a very proud descendant of West Africans brought from 12 to the United States from 12 African countries. Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Togo, Benin, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Congo. All of that, along with European ancestry, makes up who you are looking at today. So I want to share an African proverb that we often share with our Gullah-Geechee people here. And it says, however far the stream flows, it never forgets its source. And I find this proverb to completely describe our very existence as Gullah-Geechee people here in the United States. So we are, as you all know, Gullah-Geechee people are the descendants of West Africans brought to the United States and enslaved for generations. Our diverse African roots and enslavement on isolated islands and coastal areas created this beautiful, unique culture that is embodied and displayed through our spirituality, through our foodways, our arts like music and our performing arts, our language and oral traditions, and definitely, I want to say again and stress our religion and spirituality. And so the Gullah-Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor is a national heritage area designated by the United States federal government to help preserve and protect and to actually educate people about the significant contributions of our ancestors and even Gullah-Geechee people today. So the Gullah-Geechee corridor, you can see a tiny bit of it behind me and the island where I come from, St. Helena Island, but it stretches much farther than this area that you see here. So it encompasses a cultural and linguistic area along the southeastern coast of the United States, all the way from Pender County, North Carolina, stretching down the Atlantic coast to St. Johns County in Florida. So that would be about from Jacksonville, North Carolina, passing Jacksonville, Florida, down to St. Augustine. From our beautiful coast to about 30 miles inland, shares this governmental boundary that you kind of see behind me, shadowed in gray going on down. So this area is home to one of the country's most unique cultures shaped by our ancestors, by enslaved Africans brought from all of these amazing and beautiful cultures in West Africa. All of us are going to be coming from rice-producing regions, of course, West and Central West Africa, and continue today, all of these traditions that we have kept intact are going to be continued today through descendants like me. I'm one of them. I'm very proud of that. So we continue this through celebrations, through educating our local government, our federal government, our state government about why it is important to protect land and communities that are Gullah-Geechee. And then also just to help provide economic development and sustainability among the people within these communities. I don't want to take too much time because we do have other presenters that need to share. But what I want to just really be able to share with you right now is that we really want to welcome you to the Gullah-Geechee corridor when you come to the United States. I, along with Amadu, Massally, and some of the other presenters that you have today, we have all taken a pilgrimage, and I use that word intentionally, a pilgrimage, a spiritual journey to West Africa, and specifically to Sierra Leone back in 2019. And we are so grateful to Amadu Massally for coordinating that effort to really bring about international heritage tourism to Sierra Leone. So with that, I want to say again, I gladi fasi ona, and I hope fasi ona soon. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow. So as a matter of fact, that area that Victoria speaks to, the corridor, is the only such area in America, in North America, where a portion of land has been identified based on a particular group of people's history and culture. So, and Victoria was born to do this job, you know. We appreciate you. Moving along. So that's, and South Carolina is where Sierra Leoneans were first brought to from, you know, the coast, from our country, South Carolina. And then 60 years later, it was Georgia. Victoria Smalls just represented South Carolina. So now we are looking for a Georgia representative.
So this is Warren Rutherford. Is Leon?
Warren, that's Warren. I said, okay, go ahead, Warren. You were in Sierra Leone with us not too long ago, and it's your family that this song has been preserved in over the years. So tell us in 2 minutes what it feels like to you.
Well, that's really putting me on the spot. Of course, some of my older siblings, Winston, Wilson Moran, of course, can really articulate this song, but I will briefly speak 2 minutes or less about my experience in Sierra Leone. December 2019 to January 2020, we spent 10 remarkable days over the whole of Sierra Leone. We traveled from north to west to east to south and we had some amazing times led by Amadu Massally. I put in the chat there, I put a couple of things in the chat, talked about Melbourne and the time that we had in Sierra Leone where he told us about the school, the first school. But that was just a part of the trip. My experience in Sierra Leone, and one of my highlights is what Amadou is speaking of now. It was fascinating for me to learn a little bit about my ancestry, my mother's ancestry from the small, tiny village of Seminoles, Angola. And as I said earlier, I do not do the story justice when trying to recount and tell the story of how this song from Africa ended up in the small community in Southeast Georgia, Harris Neck, where my mother was born and raised. And so it's just a fascinating story, and I really hesitate to try to tell it because I may get some facts mixed up in the song, but it was remarkable to make that connection from this small village of Seminoles, Angola, all the way to the village where my mother was born and raised in Georgia. And the song, as Wilson Moran could also tell it, is a song that is of Mende descent that was sang to daughters sing this song. Mothers sing this song to their daughters. It was a burial dirge, as women were responsible for the burial arrangements to make sure that their loved ones got to the other side, if you will. And so mothers taught the song to their daughters, and they were particularly emphatic about the daughters learning this song. And so the story goes that you learn this song because if in the future someone else, you hear this song, these are your people. And that is the remarkable part. These are your people. So fast forward years later in this small town in Harris Neck, this song is sang. And of course, musicologists, other anthropologists studied this song from the US, and they took it back to Africa, and they tried to find out the origin of this song. And so all over Africa and Sierra Leone, they looked for the origins of this song and went to village to village, to city with no luck. And eventually, before the trip back to the United States, they went to Seminoles, Angola, and played the song. And to their delight and behold, the villagers was singing along with this song. And so in effect, they found the origin of the song, and that in a nutshell, and I hope I did some justice, that in a nutshell connected my mother's ancestry to that village of Seminoles, Angola, to the country of Sierra Leone and Freetown. Thank you for your time.
All right, man, you did very well, very well. So that's the story. That's one of the fascinating stories about our connections with African Americans. And I mentioned earlier how these guys, some of them ran away from slavery into Florida and stood off the entire US Army for 7 years. This is arguably the most expensive war for the Americans. I mean, historically, yeah, $20 million was spent. These people negotiated finally and moved, Black Seminoles I'm talking about now, moved from Florida, where they had an African frontier, and into Oklahoma. And representing Oklahoma on this call today is Senator Anastasia Pittman, who's a Black Seminole. And let's hear her story. Welcome, Senator Pittman.
And thank you so much, Amadu. And I apologize that I am with my father, so I'm not on camera. We are getting him ready, but I just wanted to say what an honor it is to be here to share with all of the professors, the mayor, and all of the people who are still carrying the torch of their history. It is such an honor. I am former state senator Anastasia Pittman from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I am the executive director of APRI, the Anastasia Pittman Research Institute for Indigenous People of Color. And what we have discovered is in the passing of my grandmother, we have learned to do things in her honor. She has such a rich history of her account from the Trail of Tears from Florida to Oklahoma. Their leader in Florida was a gentleman named Abraham. And Abraham was a multilingual person, a leader from Florida who we talked about the treaty that was signed. I heard you guys mention some things, but we had a treaty that was signed. We had several treaties with the Seminoles, and a treaty that was signed in 1823 from the Florida tribe of Indians. We understood that some of the population, that's where they make their first mention of African Seminoles in the population of Florida. And so there's a historical proof of the Estelusti settlement of Florida, well over 100 years prior to 1823. So we have identified our Freedman Crest, which talks about Abraham and the principal chief of the Estelusti. He was the interpreter of the Seminole Nation, and it was in the circa of the 1820s to the 1850s. And the likeness of him from wood carvings in 1858, Abraham was fluent in 6 languages. He was instrumental in the Seminole decisions, and we found Amadu in Brackettville, Texas, and made the Sierra Leone connection. So we have just been honored. But Brother Abraham, he dressed in traditional Seminole garbs. They spoke the Afro-Creole Seminole language. And if it wasn't for my grandmother who came to Florida to get us as her grandchildren who were Native, we would not know this history. So the history of the Seminole Wars was the longest running conflict with the United States that's ever been engaged. And it lasted more than 20 years, from 1817 to 1842. More federal soldiers were killed, more money was spent than any other conflict that preceded it. So the Seminoles never surrendered. So they were a fighting force that comprised of their freedom fighters that were made up of Creek, Hitchiti, Yamasee, Miccosukee, and Maroons, which were also called runaway slaves that became known as Seminoles. So the name stems from a Spanish word, cimarron, meaning runaway or wild. And so we have a crest that I will send to Amadu to share with you all on the recordings. But we also were still fighting for recognition. Now the Seminoles are federally recognized, but there are Black Seminoles and there are Red Seminoles. And sometimes we still have a present day conflict of who is entitled to federal benefits. And so the nation's name is proudly inscribed in our crest. So we have a gold ring that symbolizes unity that surrounds Abraham. The inscribed words are Estelusti and Freedman, because some of the Black indigenous people of color in Florida were not slaves. Some of them were and who fled from Georgia and South Carolina into Florida because that territory had abolished slavery. So we have the Estelusti and Black Seminoles, and the Seminoles were named by the tribe for African members of that tribe. So in 1866, the United States recognized Estelusti as full members of that tribe, of the Seminole tribe, for the first time. And at that time, the term freedman was used for any member of Black Indian tribes. So unlike other tribes in Oklahoma, the Seminoles had already fully accepted their Native Americans of African descent or Black Seminoles into the tribe. And the phrase, just like my sister gave earlier, as long as the river runs and the grass grows, the Indians and the Blacks will be as one. And so there's a star that separates the name, which symbolizes federal recognition. There's a silhouette of Oklahoma and Florida that sits on opposite sides of the ring, and it symbolizes the Trail of Tears that the Estelusti made with other Seminoles from Florida to Oklahoma. Some of them left Florida after the Seminole Wars by boat. They were not on the Trail of Tears walking. Some of them came by boat through Louisiana, which is where they picked up their Gullah-Geechee connection and heritage, all the way through the Arkansas River into Fort Gibson. Some of them fled from Fort Gibson to Mexico for their freedom, and they took on Spanish names. They were also allotted lands, and some of them fled into Texas, into Brackettville, into Nacimiento, and then some of them also returned to Oklahoma. So I was grateful to have my grandmother for over 93 years to be able to share legal documents, treaties, quitclaim deeds to land and property in Oklahoma. And now I currently serve on the Seminole Tribal Council as an elected member. I've had the opportunity to travel to Brackettville, Texas, and to Del Rio, where we had the 150th celebration of Native Americans and African Americans and indigenous people of color. So 150 years of the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts were celebrated by 5 different countries: Canada, Mexico, the Americas, Paris, France, other places. So we're very honored to be here. And just for the sake of time, I won't belabor you, but there are Sierra Leone's connections to Oklahoma from the Cudjoe brothers, Lance and Lawrence Cudjoe, who made their journey to Sierra Leone back in the 90s.
So what we're gonna
do, so what we're gonna do is hold Brother Amadu, we're gonna hold him accountable to come and connect us to the Gullah-Geechee pilgrimage and to take us back to Sierra Leone. So we're looking forward to the economic partnership, and we're looking forward to sharing other cultural stories and the relentless pursuit for freedom for Black Seminoles from Florida to Oklahoma.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much. And before we go, I just want to let them know that her Indian name is Running River. Should always running.
That is correct. Right. Thank you.
When these guys, after spending some time in Oklahoma, Black Seminoles, they were being harassed again by Indians, by white folks coming to steal their wives or daughters and children at nighttime. They had enough of it and they left. A bunch of them, led by John Horse, went into Nacimiento, Mexico, where I said earlier, Tammany wards have been found in that community by a respected historian, Dr. Ian Hancock. After they left Nacimiento, some of them, not after they left, they were invited from Nacimiento because the US Army again tried to go over there twice. And the Black Seminoles again clobbered them, Texas Rangers. So they sent them back running home to Texas. They were so impressed by them that they invited them to join the US Army. And that is when we go back into Brackettville, Texas with Miss Wendy Goodlow. Wendy, couple of minutes quickly to say hi. This is the first time we'll be hearing Sierra Leoneans. We'll be hearing from descendants of Sierra Leone or the West African region, West African coast, through South Carolina, through Georgia, through Florida, through Oklahoma, Mexico, and now Brackettville, Texas. This is where we ended as Sierra Leoneans in the Gullah-Geechee connections. Yes, go ahead, Wendy.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say good morning to everybody. This is amazing what you've put together, Amadu, and so I'm honored to be a part of this. So yes, I am representing Brackettville, Texas. So in 1842, the Black Seminoles arrived in Oklahoma Territory. And as Amadu was saying, when they arrived there, a group of them did not feel safe. They were placed right next to the Creeks, who had been their, that had been the group that the majority had broken away from. Originally, the Seminoles were Creeks or Muskogee, and when they broke away, that's the group that actually named them. So there are two places where linguists say the name Seminoles could have come from. It could have come from a Muskogee word, and it also could have come from a Spanish word meaning cimarron, meaning runaways or wild beasts. So it could have come from two distinct linguistic backgrounds. Nonetheless, when they got into Oklahoma, the US government, believing that all Native Americans got along or not really even caring to ask where they wanted to be, they placed the Seminoles right next to their Creek brethren, and the two groups didn't get along. And so their property was vandalized, their persons were vandalized, and many of the Black Seminoles were stolen into slavery by slave catchers. They had no protection. So John Horse, who was the leader of the Black Seminoles at the time, and Wildcat, who was the leader of the Seminoles, decided to seek another place of refuge for them. And it soon came about that Mexico was a safe haven because slavery had been abolished in 1829 by their president, Vicente Guerrero, who was actually a biracial president. He was half African. So that's a very important thing to note as well, that there was this president in Mexico who had abolished slavery almost, 40 years before America did. So they are invited to go into Mexico to help defend their border. So they arrive in 1850. It takes them a year to travel from Oklahoma into Texas. But when they arrive there, they arrive ready to help defend Mexico's borders. So they do this from 1850 to 1870. And for their service, Mexico actually awards them land called El Nacimiento de los Negros Mascogos. And this is actually the only country or government that ever kept their promise to the Black Seminoles to give them the land that they had offered in return for their service. So from 1850 to 1870, they served. And following that, the US military, as Amadu said as well, looked at them and said, hey, we've heard about your exploits. We're impressed. Would you like to come over stateside and do what you've been doing there? And they agree, believing that they will get more land, some money, that it will be a better deal for them. And so on, actually on July 4th, 1870, they crossed back over into Texas, actually in a city called Eagle Pass, which is actually 60 miles from here. So they were in Eagle Pass for about 2 years. And then eventually they were moved to Fort Clark, which is where Brackettville is located. The first group was only 10 men that were mustered into service, but historically over time, there was never a group that was larger than 10 men that served at one time in the military. And so they became known as the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. A total of 154 Black Seminoles served in this group. And I didn't really introduce myself, but I am the secretary of a group called the Seminole Indian Scouts Cemetery Association. And so what our mission is to promote, maintain, and protect the cemetery where these men are buried and their families. We have 4 men throughout the time. They served from 1870 to 1914 And 4 of these men throughout that time were awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. So our little cemetery in Bracketville is actually a historic landmark. And, you know, we, because it's still a working, you know, like a place where our loved ones are buried, it's not closed off. You know, we still have our families buried there. It took, well, I will speak for myself, me a long time to realize that this was a special place. You know, we knew that it was a cemetery where, you know, our loved ones were buried, but didn't realize that nationally there were people coming to visit because of these 4 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. So, you know, the exploits of the Black Seminoles are almost mythologized because they never lost a man in battle. There was never anyone seriously injured. You know, they served with distinction. And many say that, and many scholars say it's because of the guerrilla warfare that they carried with them from Florida into Oklahoma, down into Mexico, and then used that in Texas. So today, we are still 2 very distinct cities that are very proud of our Black Seminole heritage. I would say that Nacimiento is thriving. If anybody watched the news during last year when Juneteenth became a national holiday, there were many stories about how
Wendy, I think we're running out of time. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. But
so
thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you. Of course, you know, we'll be doing more of these kinds of things.
Definitely. But thank you.
All right.